I'm Jini Maxwell and welcome to DIY Musicians Make Games. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to anyone either joining us via live stream or in the room who has a connection to the world's oldest continuing culture, to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking to three people who are working in various ways in the kind of complicated, creative, curiosity-driven space between extended reality, video games, and music. Jacob Leaney, creator of, or lead, I suppose, on Monster Mansion, and creator of Video World, and more recently Halloween Valentine. Eve Klein, Associate Professor at University of Queensland, and Taana Rose, who is PhD, the only PhD third year I've ever seen who still has enthusiasm for her project, the VR opera Artemis, which we'll see very soon. I just had one little housekeeping note because I realised not everyone maybe caught the keynote, but if you want to ask questions, we're doing it all digitally. And to do it, you just scan the QR code on the back of your pass. It'll take you to the high school website. There'll be a little 3-bar menu up the top. If you click that, then press chat and Q&A, and then go down to the loft. There is a space where you can submit your questions or upvote other questions that are in there. I really like keeping things super chatty and kind of threading audience questions throughout the panel. So if you have, if the mood strikes you, please let me know. And I'm not tweeting on my phone. I'm reading your sage words. All right. So let's get started. Taana, do you want to start by introducing your project?
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. My work is Artemis XR. I've created 3 versions of the opera. One version is a Unity 3D version. Another version I created in Tiltbrush and uploaded to YouTube VR, which you can watch on your YouTube app or in an Oculus Quest headset. The third version is a live version. It's an augmented reality version, and it will be performed at the University of Queensland in October for Bloom Festival.
Gorgeous. Do you want to watch a clip?
Sure.
Just realised that I'm the only non-musician on stage and I'm the one who had to make the call when to cut that. Not easy to do. This incredible project is the artistic outcome of Taana's PhD, which is being supervised by Eve Klein, who also began as a music technologist, then ran away to the opera and is apparently convincing a lot of other music technologists to do the same. Eve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm a technologist, Stapleton trainer, ex-opera singer, composer, and person who makes trouble around classical music in various ways. So I make large-scale public artworks of various kinds, so theatre works, interactive installations, interactive biomedical performances you won't hear about today, but ask me about at drinks. But also things that play with AR, XR and games. So my most recent project you'll see a little clip of, and it's called City Symphony. And I like to do work that brings people together, especially around issues of social justice. And City Symphony was about how people feel about this kind of space that we share. So it's a mobile AR experience that kind of steals from games and game audio and interactive music in general. It's experienced as a headphone work, but it's fully interactive. So, you know, as gamers in the room, you'll know about moving through worlds and how the music responds to you as you play, and the kind of delight and surprises that you get from having sound that responds to something that you're doing in the game world. So we are doing all of those things, except with the play space being Brisbane City. So it's a augmented reality music story experience about Brisbane and its people. Had 850 people come together with me and my creative partner to make this, facilitated with a partnership with a local community music organisation called QMF. And it's this kind of very strange, very, very large collective reflection on what it means to share Brisbane from multiple different perspectives. First Nations perspectives, of course, as that kind of foundational long owners, the Yagara and Turrbal people, right through to how we feel about the future of our city with climate change.
Gorgeous. Let's switch a clip.
City Symphony is a mobile app that you can download from the Android or Apple app stores, and it's a music and story experience that you can have as you wander through Brisbane City. City Symphony came out of us really talking about our love of spatialised sound that responds to how you are and where you move.
I love exploring cities. I love just getting out and walking in them, and that's sort of like the fundamental way that I learn to love a place. It's about having an experience, walking through the city and hearing the 9 sites that we focused on.
QMF is playing a leading role in cultural placemaking across Queensland, and City Symphony gave us the opportunity to do something innovative with a technology partner that would create a point of difference for the visitor experience in Brisbane. QMF's projects always begin with a relationship with council, who's really at the heart of our engagement process. We then engage with many, many different community groups across the city, multicultural, refugee, First Nations groups, to get a really broad spread of diversity of input into it. And then we spread out into our own artist network to put together the piece.
Brisbane is not one thing, it's many things and belongs to many people. So we had to make this work represent that diversity. So we worked with over 500 artists and art workers and around 350 community participants and participants in shaping the work. So we had a really diverse set of voices coming to make this work together.
When Eve pitched me on working on the project, I began to think about what it meant for me as somebody who had only been living in Brisbane for about 6 months. It was a really lovely way, I think, for me to get to know the city. And when I heard the music for the first time, I just thought it was gorgeous. It was haunting, it was evocative, and it really just transported me.
So working with them has been amazing. Coming together, we were able to create something magical with music and healing, using both of our skills in different ways. As times are moving forward, I think it's so important that we record stories, especially with the technology today. This is a new age of technology we can use, so why not continue on telling our stories like that?
It's so personal in some ways, and you can kind of watch people's faces sort of change as they encounter different parts of the experience. From an artist's point of view, it's joyful and wonderful to see the work be so well received. You'd make a work like this to bring people closer to place. So we want people to know Brisbane better, and we want them to know each other better.
Particularly being from Brisbane and being a local, it's like really great to experience the city through like new eyes and fresh light.
It was such a calming experience.
I thought it was very thought-provoking.
It felt like I was exploring, like really just discovering things for myself.
It kind of caught me by surprise because I was experiencing obviously the music in conjunction with everything around me, but it was beautiful.
I would describe City Symphony in one word as relaxing.
Blissful.
Peaceful.
Inspiring.
Heartfelt.
Those are some good words. I'd be very pleased with that collection of words. Finally, we have Jake.
Hi everyone. Was that Kate Miller-Heidke? Yes. Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, I love pop music. Obsessed with Kate Miller-Heidke. No, my background is in like pop songwriting and production, and I kind of wanted to find a way to be both a game developer and a pop star. So kind of my thing is like, how can I put them together? So I try to create works where I write and release pop music as the artist Monster Mansion, and then create video games that are based on those songs and really use the songs and the lyrics to inform what the video game is, what the story is. And you know, the real challenge or something I'm really trying to find with it is how to convey, you know, a 3-minute pop song in the way that I wrote it in a video game, when it's, you know, so much of it is about interactivity and about player agency. So what's the clip that you're going to play from the first one, the second one?
I'll never tell. No, it's, I think, a 20-second clip from Halloween Valentine.
Great,
in
okay.
Video World.
Yeah.
Let's do Halloween Valentine first.
Okay, so my current project is called The Halloween Valentine, which is a puzzle adventure pop album set in a haunted amusement park on Valentine's Day. So this is kind of my first like full-length album that I'm writing, and a lot of the songs I've been writing over the last year have been about like relationships and heartbreak and vulnerability, and also friendships as well. And so the themes of the game, I'm trying to explore those things and use the songs to like escalate that storytelling, and kind of imbue the characters with a bit more, I don't know, a bit more something that you don't get to experience much in games, which is lyrics and pop songs.
Let's have a look.
Go downstairs from my head to take up space in my fingers, to give them the weight to get the real life you.
So it's pretty early in development. I only just announced it like kind of officially in the last week or so.
Woo!
Thanks.
And the other clip we have is Video World.
Video World is actually kind of not quite a prequel to a Halloween Valentine, but it was the project. It was my first kind of commercial project, and it came with a 3-track EP, and that was kind of one of my first experiences really collaborating with a lot of different people, both in songwriting and then in game development. And it was just so much fun and lovely. So that kind of led to a Halloween Valentine. So it's a bit of a precursor, really.
Gorgeous. Well, I think collaboration is kind of a great note to start on, maybe. How many artists did you work with on Video World, and in what capacity?
For Video World, I collaborated with 2 different songwriters, and then there was other people in the team for like kind of recording, producing the drums and mixing and mastering. So there was quite a lot of people on the music. And then in terms of the game itself, I think there was probably 3 or 4 different artists that I work with, from like character designers, character artists, animator, concept artist, texture artist. And then, you know, QA actually had a lot to do with the design as well. And then just, you know, like people here and there giving me advice or helping me with code. So I guess the total amount of people I collaborated with to make that project come to life was probably, you know, like 15 people or so, even for such a small game.
That's a pretty massive, for your first kind of commercial project, that's a lot of people to be managing. How did you find that experience?
Yeah, I mean, most of it was kind of like one thing at a time. And for something like songwriting collaborations, you kind of do it in a day or two. And actually, I found that was kind of the case with a lot of the other collaborations as well. It'd be a workshop here, or it'd just be a small thing that they would help me with, and then I would take it away and develop it further. So it wasn't 15 people like in an office at once.
It's a relief. While working on Artemis, Taana, you must have worked with opera singers, I imagine. How did you find, I mean, I guess I'm curious, how do you pitch like an extended reality opera to a working opera singer? And what was the reaction? Were they keen to get involved? Were they curious, confused?
Yeah, so I sent out a call out and yeah, they were really interested in being involved, and basically we workshopped a whole lot. So I came along with my score and we just workshopped it for the first rehearsals, and I really appreciated their input as well. And yeah, and as it's a tech opera as well, there's technical elements such as synthesizers which I composed. So those will be also, yeah, you can hear those in the backing track basically. There's synthesizer and the mezzo-soprano and tenor singers. Yeah, they did a beautiful job, and yeah.
Amazing. When you say you workshopped the score, what does that look like? Did you get feedback from your performers that surprised you, or how did that shape the work?
Sure. So basically, I composed it in Finale and then printed it out, and we worked through the score, and they basically gave me some feedback on some things that, you know, could be pitched better, and just some narrative elements that I was then explaining how that works into the story. So basically helping them characterize their characters, Orion and Artemis.
Gorgeous. Typically, when one watches an opera, they don't have the opportunity to walk around the performers. They're kind of getting very directed experience. How did you kind of, from a, I suppose, composition or perspective and a score writing perspective, how did you approach, I suppose, accommodating for player agency or audience agency?
Sure. So as I'm the developer and the composer on this, the synthesis of the visuals and the music is really important, and I was able to create that symbiosis basically by composing the music and working on the visuals at the same time. So that affords for more basically control on both elements. Yes, and yeah, so the Unity 3D version, for example, the user walks around the space and interacts with the different vases that I've created in Unity. So I've used assets from the store. And basically, when you walk towards a certain vase, a different aria or duet plays. So therefore, the audience member is the performer. They actually walk around, and their interaction with the space creates the linear or non-linear elements of the opera. So the YouTube VR version is linear in a sense because it's been rendered, and I used Adobe Premiere Pro to render that and make the 360-degree video. However, the Unity 3D version has interactive elements.
Incredible. There's actually a really great question, I think, from the audience that maybe the three of you can all kind of approach. That is, acknowledging that sound is inherently immersive, what guides you in deciding when a score should be experienced by listeners as an interactive engagement? So I suppose.
Great. So basically, each aria or duet plays according to your interaction with the set. So with mine, it's actually broken up into chunks. However, the Foley that I recorded and also mapped to different trees in Unity 3D, that it depends on where the person is walking around.
Something that I would kind of throw in is that really when there's an emotional moment or when you want to escalate something, and music is so good at conveying emotion and sound at all. It doesn't have to be music necessarily. It conveys theme, it conveys vibe and atmosphere, emotion. So I think anytime, you know, in an interactive experience, when you want to escalate that or convey something, particularly if you don't have the means to do it visually, like maybe you can't have a really complex animation, or you kind of want to, you know, to create a a scene in like, the Arctic or something, you don't have to show that visually. You can just show some audio and like, give that. So I think there's lots of cases, but I like to throw it in those kind of emotional moments where you want the player to just feel something a bit extra.
And there's lots of different ways that you can make music interactive as well, and it's about finding the right device for the right moment in the experience, because one of the things, interactivity works really well in music when it's actually enhancing the rest of that journey. You don't want it to hit people over the head. You want it to help them find whatever is going on in that kind of emotional journey or story. And one of the things with City Symphony that we had was that we wanted people to have a seamless experience because we never wanted to take them out of place. So even though there was 9 different locations and all of them had different kinds of interactivity across the different sites, we didn't ever want people to feel like their music experience was disrupted. So we actually looked very carefully at how do you transition between different modes of making music interactive. So some, you've got song structures laid out in public spaces that can be engaged with in different ways. Others, it's different layers that come in and out of the music, so this, horizontal and vertical resequencing, we call it. Those sorts of strategies. Some, it's remixed depending upon how you're moving, but it all has to feel coherent to whatever that experience is. And it could be a game experience, it could be an experience of wandering in the world, but it has to serve that bigger journey for it to be effective.
How do you playtest? How did you go about playtesting a work like City Symphony, like a work of this scale? Music and I think like public art being quite personal things that people respond to unpredictably. I have to know.
So we did, and this is possibly an exaggeration, but not by much, hundreds of thousands of user tests. We'd made a version of Brisbane City in Unity so that we could actually program it as you'd experience it from our studio, and then we would, every week be out there doing tests ourselves. But we also worked a lot with different user groups to come in and test different experiences as they were developing, and everyone had different phones. And because this was a project about, actually actively engaging people from Brisbane, we needed it to be inclusive, so it had to be iOS and Android compatible. We had to support really, really old phones. And so there was a lot of complexity because you'd have people who would be like, there's this thing on my mobile phone and it doesn't feel like it's working. And sometimes we'd be there and we'd ask questions and we'd look at what's going on the phone, and it's not that there was necessarily anything wrong, it's just that people aren't used to an experience like this. And so we took all of that feedback and we used that to shape the graphic interface so that it could give people enough information to help them find their way through a complex experience like that, but also not take them out of being present, because we wanted people to look up from their phones, to be wandering around and having that interactive experience. But what we learnt really strongly through our user testing process was that for AR in particular, the visuals on screens need to kind of give people clues as to what's going on. They can't be wholly in the world all of the time because they really want to know how it works.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention accessibility, because that's something I have thought about a lot with AR, that it can be quite gated, like who can kind of approach who can actually like approach AR works, not just in terms of having the knowledge to do so, but also the actual access to technology. Could you speak a little bit more about the kind of, I suppose, how accessibility and inclusivity shaped your project and how the vision changed to accommodate that user testing?
Well, one of the good things, because we worked with a partner organisation who had experience doing things all across Queensland with all different kinds of, communities with different accessibility needs, they were able to provide us with some expert advice. And one of those things was that we employed a disability consultant who provided us technical advice during particularly the early planning of the game, but who'll kind of provide ongoing, support as we try and do things better, because there were some things that just because of, you know, the scale of the technical development team, which was me and Ravi, who's the other half of Textology, so two people made this whole thing. You know, there was things that we wanted to implement that we couldn't, and we're very aware of some of the accessibility limitations. It's not especially great for people who are deaf or hard of hearing currently, and we've had a lot of discussions about how we can change that.
Something I'd actually like to ask both of you. I've found, like, through trying to make interactivity in games more accessible, it's actually often made the game just better for everyone. Has that been your experience with interactive works as well? Great.
I can say something on that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did, because, you know, it's physically walking through a city, the council has an accessibility map, and we thought about like how we could use the existing accessibility infrastructure to shape the locations, for example, that we selected for our experience. And of course, when you make it easy for a person to walk or be in a wheelchair, it makes it easy for people who have prams or small children, you know, or people who just don't like to walk too much, you know.
There's actually another question here about, quite a few questions about City Symphony. Again, beautifully chatty audience. Thank you so much. We were speaking about collaboration earlier and I didn't get to you, but obviously City Symphony was like an incredibly collaborative project. And this question asks, how did you translate the experiences and stories of different communities and community members into kind of an interactive musical project? And how does the physical space that the work took place in kind of shape that journey?
Yeah, it's you have to do it ethically. There are lots of considerations. I actually wrote an academic paper about the curation process because we had to think really deeply about how we do that, and the kind of base way is actually just being a human being. So we went out and we talked to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people for the first 12 months of the project. Had cups of tea, we had meals, I went to community groups, we had a chat. We talked about what different community organisations needed, how they wanted to represent themselves, and how they wanted to have an intervention into public space. You know, it's political what you choose to put where in a public artwork. And there are there are lots of considerations, you know, the foundational thing being that all of Brisbane City is stolen land that has been built upon. So, you know, you have to start by first addressing and acknowledging that as a kind of baseline concern. But of course, there's this, you know, shared layers of ownership and shared histories and divergent histories. So we talked to a lot of people and we found that there were stories that came up again and again around particular sites, and we found people who came to represent a kind of common story. And so we used those individual people's stories in a lot of instances to tell that bigger story of a particular kind of experience. So we had one journey that was about the forgotten Australians, a period in Australian history where children who were institutionalised and lots of children weren't given care and protection. We have another story about the experience of you know, a young man who migrated to Australia as an Afghani refugee just prior to September 11 and then encountered all of that backlash of coming to Australia and being Muslim and being treated like a terrorist in a country that was new and, you know, thought would offer protection. So those kinds of, that was, you know, and we had conversations around, well, how do you tell these stories and keep people safe? And we decided that an ethical way to do that was where we needed to. We protected the person whose story it was, of course, with their consent and with their, by enabling them to help us with the editing process and sharing kind of responses back. But we didn't want to shy away from those stories. We thought probably the most unethical response would be to silence those histories of Brisbane. We want people to engage with the fact that Brisbane, like all cities, is complicated, and some of that's not very nice. So we made a curation decision to tell those stories honestly.
There's a real power, I think, in just asking people how they want to be represented. Yeah. Like, it seems so obvious, but I feel like it's only kind of just coming into the mainstream that that's a normal thing that you do when there's someone that you know, when it's not your story to tell.
How did you then, I suppose, translate that really collaborative storytelling and story-making process into directives for musicians? Or was that also very collaborative?
Most of it was very collaborative. There was lots of ways, because each kind of site had a different way that the material came together. So some of it, you know, I composed after spending time with people for a really long time and pulled that together. Others, artists were commissioned, local artists were commissioned. So there's an incredible collection of artists from Cape Mill Hyde Key, you know, hip hop artists like Jeswa, the Ancient Bloods, Hope D, you know, like right the way through intercultural artists of different kinds. So Jade Ensemble, Burley singers, like all the different kinds of people who make music in Brisbane were represented in some kind of way. I was the main bridge between most of that. So it was my job, you know, I think my official title was lead composer and audio director, but it was my role to make sense. So some of that was, you know, recorded conversations, how to edit those appropriately, what music to put with them, who, you know, working to find the most appropriate artists to respond, you know, sending them out snippets of text and then, you know, re-editing the music that came back. And so it was really collaborative in the sense that we worked with just lots and lots of people, but a large amount of that was just having these kind of cycles. So me doing some work or me talking with people, me sending it back, them sending it back to me, and it's just being this process of iteration so that it could be genuinely reflective of everyone who had a stake. And, you know, each site represents so many different people that we had to do it that way. So we had a Discord server where, you know, I'd just post files and go, anyone got anything? But, you know, for some people, the Discord server was really hard to use. So, you know, I was like dropping around USB keys and...
Yeah, this is always the work in creative projects people don't tell you. There's a lot of like sandwich making. Do you relate to that, Jake, being the kind of nexus in the creative project? Or do you think of Monster Mansion as more, I suppose, slightly more hierarchical kind of process where you're bringing people onto your thing?
Yeah, it is. It is very much that. You know, I'll collaborate with people, you know, and really take. Or, you know, we'll create something together, but I usually try to see my job as getting the best out of other people, getting them to do their best work, and, you know, what can I learn from them? How can I escalate what they're creating and then bring that into my own cohesive vision? So kind of, I don't know, it's like everyone that I work with is kind of like a different, you know, a different color on like a palette, and then I get to have the paintbrush and actually bring it all together. And I think that's at least where my strength is, and also what I really love in creativity is being able to, I guess, empower other people. And I've never collaborated with someone where I haven't learnt something from them as well. It doesn't matter how much experience they have or I have or wherever we come from. Or who's, you know, the creative director in that collaborative moment, you know, to be able to really give that space to people to express themselves. That's where the gold is. It isn't in telling them how to collaborate with me or what they need to create. It's about going, hey, what do you think? Or like, here's my idea, make it better. And then bring all of that into a cohesive vision. Or at least that's kind of the way that I approach collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like that's pretty true across the board for all three of you. When you were first showing Artemis to your singers, what was their reaction? Were they surprised? Or, I would love to know.
So basically, because the work was developed at the same time, like the audio and the visuals, they didn't actually see the work They simply performed the work and I recorded the audio and then I combined it with the visuals in Premiere Pro. So I rendered it. And yeah, I mean, if they watched it in their free time, I'm not sure how they responded to it. Yes. Yeah.
That's so interesting. What about you, Jake? How have your various colours responded to the application of your paintbrush?
I think mostly positively from my experience so far. And something that's just come to mind, I did a collaboration with Ben, who's just sitting down the front here, actually. Sorry to embarrass you. We worked on a song together a while ago. We'd never worked together before. And a while after we wrote it, he called me up and he's like, Jake, we need to swap the verse and the chorus. And I think to have, like, to feel like someone, I guess, trusts me enough to give that feedback, like that really made me feel like, I guess it was a positive collaboration, and that I hope that most people feel empowered to do that. You know, when I take it and put it together, go, hey, like, I really like what you're doing, but I want to be able to have ownership in it as well. And I think giving people a little bit of ownership in that overall thing is important. And again, it always improves it. Like the next iteration, feedback on anything, whether it's music or games, only ever improves it. And so I think that working in that way and letting people know that they're really valued and that their ideas are important and the way that their perspective is important, I think really allows them to have that ownership and give more to it. Yeah, so I think they're okay with the painting.
Did you, again, a question for all three of you, over the course of your creative careers, how has the process been of, I suppose, letting go of the reins in that way and like learning to welcome in that form of collaboration? Because I bet it didn't start this easy.
No, it's taken me a long time, actually. It's really difficult, I think, just to go, here's my idea, particularly when you're kind of passing it off to someone. So for example, for me, I don't really do art at all. So to be like, here's my vision that I'm describing and doing bad sketches of, like, can you go and make it? To like just trust completely in someone. It's taken a long time, and part of it's actually finding the right people that do understand you. But I think the biggest thing that I learned was just like, you just have to let go of your ego and accept that oftentimes people actually do know better than you. And so I try to come at it with that angle these days and go, okay, even if I'm not happy with this at first, I'm going to just sit with it and trust that person's skills. But yeah, it's taken a long time to lose that ego for me, I think.
So I think for me, basically working in collaborative environments comes quite naturally with improvising in music groups and that sort of thing. I feel like I have that experience of just letting other people create. So workshopping, it feels quite natural, and I'm quite happy for others to bring their vision on board. And basically the sum is, it's all the parts together, and I think that's the beauty of work as well, that's bringing other people in and trusting them.
There's also something to be said for finding your tribe. So I've had a lot of long-term collaborators, people who I've grown with over sometimes up to 20 years, who, I don't make all my artwork with the same group of people, but there are people that I come back to again and again because I know that I trust them to do work with me in particular ways, and it depends upon the project. But I've had some projects where, as a performer on stage, for example, I've been particularly vulnerable and I've needed support because, the performance work is very, very hard. Others, you've got where the project is just so big that you need to work with people that will do their thing and will get what you're trying to do, and you get what they're trying to do, so you can just let them do their thing. And it does depend upon the project, but I think that finding your tribe and finding people that you can grow along with you have to like the people that you do projects with, especially if it's going to be over a long period of time where you have choice. Choose the people that, you know, you'd like to have a drink with afterwards.
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, I think, particularly in the creative arts, it can feel competitive and like, oh, I want to be the smartest person in the room. I want my thing to be the best. Yeah. But actually surrounding yourself with people that are more experienced, that are better than you at whatever skill it is, or that are a little bit intimidating in some ways, is just so healthy. It's so, of course you want to be friends with them as well. That's a really big part of it. And finding that cross section of people who you really like, but that are also someone you can learn from. And yeah, I think that's the kind of gold mine.
I can relate to that. There's actually a huge joy to be found in not being the smartest person in the room. It's the best feeling ever.
Yes.
Here, new question. We've got a few, but I might have to take a second to pass that one. But there's a question here about some of the challenges you have found or faced having kind of creative practices that are so multidisciplinary and can't easily be sort of categorized.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think the first, or at least the biggest kind of obstacle that I had to overcome was actually thinking that being such a generalist and having a lot of different passions, I thought it was a huge weakness, particularly in the world of game development and any kind of professional industry specialists that are just like the master of one thing, like being the best singer, being the best songwriter, being the best Unity developer, is kind of the message. And that, of course, has its place. And I was like, I want to be a game developer and I want to be a musician, but I'm kind of not committing to either of them. And this is a real weakness. And realizing that thing that I actually didn't like about myself was the special thing. That was a huge, huge moment for me. I think I'll leave it there.
That's a very nice reframing of the question. I like that.
You don't have an elevator pitch when you're multidisciplinary, which, in today's very Twitter brand-driven kind of ethos, it's really hard to sell yourself. Like, I can't pitch my work to a record label because there is no record label that will deal with orchestration meets electronica meets noise meets opera meets pop. There just isn't.
Yet.
And so, you kind of, it is a bit of a struggle, but it hasn't actually affected my career very much. I get to make very large, very interesting, very challenging projects, very diverse projects, without necessarily having to categorize myself, but it just is really hard trying to sell. You're not a brand, you're a collection of curiosities, as I said before, and idiosyncrasies. So,
yeah, I would agree with that, and I guess it depends what you do. But I found that kind of leaning into one thing, and then all my additional things being like the niche within that. So kind of, I found much more like easy success being like, I'm a game developer. I'm going for funding for video games. Video games is my thing. But then excite them with being like, but I write pop songs. And like, I guess finding whatever is kind of a downstream path and then bringing all of your other stuff to that is at least one way to approach it. Yeah.
Basically not having a show reel per se when you're applying for game jobs is interesting, I think. So today I was thinking, I haven't really got a show reel, and I was talking to some really interesting people who are in the industry, and they're saying, we listened to the first 5 seconds of your show reel. And I was thinking, I've been sending in resumes. So I guess that's what an issue is because it's a whole opera that I've created with mentors and supervisors and that sort of thing. I haven't actually gotten around to, basically being like, I just do this one thing. I've got a whole opera to show, but that's a different,
So it sounds like you're starting to think about maybe not post-Artemis, but other work that you're excited to do alongside Artemis. What kind of projects do spark that curiosity for you?
Sure. So basically, also creating film music. I've done some film music, and yeah, I also write papers with my supervisors, so academia as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned you were interested maybe in working in games?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. What kind of... Tell me more.
Yes, tell us more,
Tell
please.
us more.
Give Taana a job.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically having quite a broad skill set with electronic music and classical music, and combining those two, I guess that's quite niche in a way, but yeah, so that's an interesting thing. And
Yeah.
I also do sound engineering and technical support, so you know.
You've got it all. What do you think you would like to see, I suppose, in game audio? Like, is there, you know, untapped potential somewhere, you think, from working on Artemis? Like, yeah, what do you think?
I think female-centric stories is becoming more and more important, and representation. So I think that's great to see in this new field, and also just, yeah, basically new works that explore that area.
Gorgeous. Let's do a couple of audience questions. Working with Unity as sound designers and composers, how did you find the learning curve? Is that something you'd worked with before?
So I hadn't worked with it prior to 2020, and basically having great mentors and supervisors helped me out, and YouTube tutorials, so yeah.
Stack Overflow. I think I had a similar experience. I started just teaching myself coding and Unity, and just had one or two friends that were more experienced than me and were really like willing to help me. And if anyone's like actually looking to start programming and start getting into coding, stuff like, the name of it's gone out of my head. It's like a Java thing that basically teaches you Java, but it's in a very visual way. And I'm a very visual person, and so learning coding when it's just like a terminal, like C++ stuff is so boring, or even in Unity is difficult, but just finding a way to learn coding that's very visual really got me to learn it very, very quickly and understand the concepts.
Great. I feel like pretty consistent themes I'm picking up on over these panels are go on YouTube and make some friends. It's been like really good advice.
Like, you know, I think it's like just like music, assuming most of you are kind of musical audio people, you actually just have to make a lot of stuff, like fail fast. Just try and make things like, you know, you write 20 terrible songs and then you write something that you really, really love. It's the same with coding or making interactive experiences, at least in my experience. Just make a lot of really bad things and they actually won't be as bad as you think. You know, you'll get there, but just dive in and do it.
So one last general question for all three of you. In the next 10 years, what kind of work would you like to see being made, like interactive audio work? Dream big.
So I think basically works that are classical and electronic and fusing different genres. So crossover XR works would be fantastic, and seeing more of that, and even introducing it into traditional venues. Yeah.
I really want to see different kinds of stories being told in games and VR and AR with different voices, you know. I want there to be intersectionality in the stories that we tell. And one of the things, you know, City Symphony has shown me is that everybody has a story to tell in these mediums. It's just about making sure that they have access. So I'd like for that access to be there.
I'd really love to see... Okay, this is my dream. So
yeah, go on.
So a record label that is also a game development studio, where basically, you know, artists, songwriters, performers are empowered to tell more of their story, more of how they want to express themselves through video games. I think particularly in pop music, there's a real restriction on you know, what you can say as an artist, or even in one song, and it's so much about, you know, you know, as an idol or people looking up to you and how you look, and you know, that visual element. But video games are just, I think, a way that would enable artists to tell more things that they, you know, they want to express, be able to include like lots of more different kinds of collaborators, and, you know, have the music as kind of the thing, but the video games really, you know, create a world around that. I think that would be really beautiful, and I can't imagine any artist that wouldn't want to be able to express themselves with more breadth, really.
Actually, maybe we could dive into that a little bit further.
Right.
Because there is a question here for you. When you're thinking about how a song, are you thinking about how a song will translate into a game while writing it? Or is that something you think about after it's written?
After it, absolutely. Like when I songwrite, it's like I'm writing this song to express myself and to like let the song become what it is. That's kind of like the music is the space where I just get to do whatever I want, and I don't think about the audience while I'm writing the song, whereas video games is the total opposite. For me, it's much more like a marketing first approach, like creating, you know, commercial games. It's like, okay, what audience is this for? How do I convey everything that I want to say? How do I kind of make it fit while still being me? And putting songs in there is kind of my sneaky way of going, I can say whatever I want in these songs, and yeah, I don't have to think about the audience as a songwriter, because the game is doing that for me. So it's very much the songs first, and then the game is informed by them and also by the audience. But the songs, yeah, they just get to be their own thing, and my own, you know, my collaborators' kind of brain dump of what we want to express at that time.
Interesting. So why is the video game a perfect home for, I suppose, Video World, the album?
I mean, I think it is, you know, it's a little bit selfish. I just want to be able to create, you know, put my two passions into one thing. But also, you know, Video World in particular, all of the characters in there have some element of me. And in a song, you know, whether it's, you know, a couple of songs or a full album, there's still only a small amount of things that I can say or express, because, you know, a song is generally like 1 or 2 ideas over 3 minutes. But a game allows me to like show more of who I am. So for example, in Video World and a Halloween Valentine, there's a character that's like very loud and outgoing and wants to be the center of attention. But then there's another character that's like much more like chill and confident and quiet. And then another character that's just like really, really goofy and silly. And those are all different parts of me that I, you know, don't necessarily get to express in music. You know, my music, I guess, persona or personality isn't as specific as any of those things. So being able to, yeah, have a game that allows me to be those different characters and allow other people to, yeah, experience what I want to express is really exciting and really freeing, to be honest, as an artist.
Taana, have you ever experienced an audience member doing something that you totally didn't predict? Well, or this looks like I've stumbled across a story.
So I guess, yeah, when people are in VR, they like wave their arms around. And,
Yeah.
you know, you don't want to hit things, but most of my works they've been basically premiered overseas in Chicago, so I haven't actually seen people experiencing them per se. Yeah, I have seen some friends and family, you know, trying it out.
So I think the perception of opera is often that it appeals exclusively to, or primarily to older people. How can, which I don't think is true, but it's fine. So I'm interested, and I think the perception of extended reality is that it appeals exclusively to younger people, which I also don't think is true. But how do you communicate, I suppose, to these separate audiences that this is a work for them or for anyone?
Yeah, so basically the XR elements engage younger audiences and diverse audiences, and that was the whole idea with combining opera and XR. And yeah, the future is basically, you know, including all age groups and all people, so yeah.
Beautifully put. All right, I think that is all we have time for today, but thank you so much, Jacob, Eve and Taana.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.